I am drawn to fiction and fantasy like a moth to the brightest of lights. Worlds of adventure and magic, tales of heroism and tests of courage, illuminated on the pages before me. But in my consideration of reading, I tend to separate my experiences of books and other mediums, the pros and cons of each holding the scale perfectly in balance, freeing me to choose with no remorse and change my stance with no affliction. So this topic was never an if, but a when. Manga.
I enjoy binging media, and I think that that's not an uncommon thing to do with today's streaming services, with social media. You kind of find yourself in an endless scroll, or you go on Netflix, you find a show you like, watch 1 or 2 episodes. Before the night's over, you finish the entire season. Like I did with Pluto not too long ago. But we're not here to talk about Pluto. We're not here to talk about YouTube. We're not here to talk about binging TV shows. We're here to talk about manga, which excites me very much because I really do enjoy reading manga. So, as of late, I've been reading a lot of manga. About a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I threw up my back. I was bedridden, wasn't able to do anything, couldn't move, couldn't breathe hardly. And so I had a lot of time to catch up on some reading. And so I did. In the span of about a week, while I was down and out, I caught up in One Punch Man. For reference of where I was at in the series, I watched season 1 of One Punch Man years ago when the anime came out. I don't know if it was season 2, but I saw up until like the tournament arc thing where Saitama was in a karate tournament thing. Didn't see the end of that season, but that's where I pretty much stopped at. So there was about 100 chapters of that I had to catch up on, caught up on that. And then because my friend had been recommending it so much, I started Bleach. And we are now on the last arc of Bleach. And I have mixed feelings about it, but we could talk about that at a later date. Today, we're just talking about the broad scope of the broad spectrum, the idea of manga. Now, as far as manga goes, I don't just read those two. I have mangas that I read weekly through the Shonen Jump app. There's other mangas that I don't read weekly because I want to be able to catch a couple chapters at a time when they come out. So, but I read some online. I don't have any hard copies, only because I didn't realize Barnes & Nobles sells manga. So hopefully soon I'll be getting my hands on some hard copies of my favorite series like One Piece and stuff like that, because I do want to somehow, some way in the future, get my hands on the entire collection of the volumes of manga for my favorite series. But yeah, the weekly ones I would read, like JJK, My Hero, One Piece, as of late, Strawberry, Wild Strawberry, Blue Lock, and Aowashi. Those are probably my favorites as of right now. Am I going to find more? Absolutely. I'm also working through a couple others I'm trying to catch up with. All of those I just named, I'm currently not reading, just so by the time I catch up on the other ones that I'm behind in, I will hopefully have a couple weeks of chapters that I can read and binge of my favorite ones. Because who doesn't love a good binge? So why do I like manga? I feel like that's a good place to start in talking about manga, because with anime and manga and that whole kind of, how many times am I going to say manga in this episode? It's already becoming one of those things where it's starting to not feel like a word. But with the whole anime type of related content, people don't necessarily always see the appeal and think it's weird or think it's strange or think, it's not for me. I don't like cartoons. And those are valid points. I can't disagree with any of those things. But why do I personally like manga? It's kind of like a comfort rewatch of a show. You know, if you go back and you rewatch Friends or The Office or New Girl, because you know the storylines and how they're going to unfold, you know what happens where and what season, you can just kind of watch, turn your brain off, and enjoy the show. That's kind of the feeling I get from reading shonen manga, at least. Specifically shonen manga. When you kind of go outside of the scope of shonen, things get a little bit different, but with shonen especially, you will be able to find where the plot points are, what the formula is for the arcs, and at that point I can almost kind of shut my brain off and just fall into the world that is unfolding before me in the stories. Besides that, reading weekly manga gives me that same feeling as being a kid again, when you would catch your favorite TV shows at a certain time, at a certain day of the week. I do remember waking up early on Saturday mornings to watch your favorite TV shows, because I sure didn't. But I do remember staying up late on Friday or Saturday nights with my TV on low volume, trying to hide and watch the anime about the boy with a demon in his stomach so my parents wouldn't hear, because they did not mess with demons, but I messed with Naruto. Pause. But Naruto was like the first anime I ever watched, and that's what kind of set off this whole train of events that would lead me into eventually further down the line going through the whole One Piece story, not once but twice. So this is why this has become, over the years, kind of like my comfort rewatch. For me, it's not even like a nostalgia factor of like, oh, I wake up and I get to relive these days. No, it's just general hype each week, especially when the stories get to a climactic point in a certain arc or in the overall story, in the work itself. There's just so much to look forward to. There's so many details you're looking to see, how things play out, how things pan out, what callbacks come in from earlier arcs and earlier chapters, how things are going to wrap up, who's going to win what fight. It's all extremely hype. It's almost like when you're waiting for a certain movie to come out because your favorite actor is going to be in it, and you see a year before when they drop the trailer and you're like, I'll be excited to watch that when the time comes. And then about a month before, you're like, man, I'm about to pre-order these tickets because I got to get to this movie theater and see this. And it's that hype, but every single week, barring breaks. And finally, the last thing that I really enjoy about manga is the fact that it gives me something that other media doesn't give me a whole lot of. And it might occur here and there in some specific kinds of stories, but manga gives me lore. And not just story-specific lore, but lore as far as things to look into outside of just the story itself. So Jujutsu Kaisen, for example, pulls more from what I believe to be like Japanese folklore and history. And then you have One Piece, the 1,000-chapter behemoth that it is, that pulls from pretty much everything. Greek mythology, different religious ideologies, Aesop's fables, you name it, it's probably in there. And I like that you can look at characters, you can look at ways that the world is built, ways that the author or the mangaka or the artist explains things, or how they tie things together, or how the story is unfolding. You can tell that there's an influence coming from somewhere else, and I really enjoy that particular aspect of manga. I like to see how you take various influences and turn them into a cohesive story. How do you take influences from both history, nonfiction, and fiction to tie into a wacky story about a pirate traveling around the world looking for treasure? Sometimes you pull from history because it might have actually happened. And sometimes you pull from mythology to show how a certain character's rise to greatness is going to be followed up by a tragic flaw and fall. It's something that I've always enjoyed doing, whether it's watching movies and trying to break down why certain scenes look the way they do, or why a certain character did a certain thing. The analysis of these stories is always fun for me. And when you get these, especially these long mangas, these long stories that have all these different influences and all these different references, it's really cool to see what you missed and what you didn't miss. To see what you thought was a plot point, or what you thought was a reference or an ideology or some kind of influence, and see if that's really what's happening, because you don't know right away. It might not be for 50 chapters that you even see if that was the case of what was happening. But when it happens, you go, I got it, or I didn't. And for me, that's a lot of fun. And I think one of the things that intrigues me about this and interests me so much is that when you learn how these things work together and how these artists and authors put these things together, it helps you, or at least helps me, to make better content myself, to make better stories, to make better videos and films and things like that, that I know how to direct the flow of what I'm saying, how to direct the flow of what I'm showing, and how to keep the audience interested, but also how to incorporate all the different things that influence me, as well as all the things that might influence me but don't have an immediate impact or immediate relevance to what it is I'm talking about. Another thing that I enjoy about manga is the effect of a good manga. When a story gets a really strong fan base and a community builds around it, there's so much more that happens that you might not immediately think when you think about a Japanese comic on 18 to 20 pages of content. I've been following a couple of YouTubers that do weekly breakdowns of chapters, that do theories and put out different kind of content around One Piece, around JJK, around My Hero, all these different things, because when a series has been out for a while, there's a lot to pull from to formulate a theory. And especially with shows like One Piece or with works like One Piece, there's a lot to theorize about. Who would win what fight? What is the overall goal? Who's going to come back at the end? Who's going to be here? Who's going to be there? There's a lot to think about, and people will really go in and break down not even just a whole page, but a specific panel and pull out information from that, pull out individual words, looking at the Japanese translations and the English translations and seeing if there's anything that didn't get quite appropriately translated or missing something because of how the languages differ, and really breaking down where there might be a theory as to explain what's going to happen later on in the story. I think that's super cool. I think that taking the time to really try to understand something that you enjoy on a weekly basis, taking to that level might seem a bit much, but it's great content in my opinion. And through that, you don't only get theories, you get power scaling debates, which personally I don't really care about. I don't care if you think Goku could solo the entire anime universe. You do you, bro. I don't care. But when it's not taken too seriously, when it's kind of joking, and it can be fun. I like seeing character comparisons. One of my favorites is people who like Zoro versus Sanji and their reasoning behind it in One Piece. With the character comparisons and analyses, you get to see how foils are interacting, how foils are built, and how well they're built. And you also get to see how you can take a foil or the opposition to the protagonist, but not necessarily have an antagonist, just have someone that went down a similar path, but it veered off somewhere and they ended up in a different spot. And I like being able to see when you make those comparisons, you get to see what would happen if your favorite character or the main character, whoever it might be, would have gone a different path. And finally, the potential excitement or letdown when your favorite manga gets an anime adaptation. As a One Piece fan, I've been super excited seeing where they're at with animating Wano right now. Seeing big moments in the story taken from still panels, still static pictures in black and white on a page, brought to life with all the colors, all the animation, all the effects. It's great. And it's not always like that. Sometimes you get an adaptation that doesn't quite hit the mark, but it lets you know that at least there's other people that rock with the same story you do so much that they felt the need to make a show out of it. And even if it's not the best, you still might enjoy it to some degree. I love fantasy and fiction. I love to be taken into another world, whether it's filled with adventure, magic, or even the mundane happenings of a protagonist. I like to see how characters progress, where they start, where they end up. Did they change? What caused it? Did they change? Why didn't they? What fuels them? What are their ideologies? Where are they going? How will they get there? Who started with them? And who will be there at the moment of victory or in defeat? I enjoy reading novels and other books, but manga gives me the blueprint. I don't have to imagine the whole thing from scratch. I can see the setting on the page. I can follow the fight scenes and see the emotions reflected on the faces of the characters, and also, less words. I have a pretty vivid imagination, but when I feel like letting the author take the reins, having the illustrations is a game changer. And the illustrations. Yeah, a lot of characters might end up looking the same from series to series, but the style of the artist is a distinguishing factor in itself. How they show happiness, relief, amazement, intensity, sadness. When you spend enough time with any piece of work, you pick up the tendencies of the artist. You can tell where their affinities lie. So even when the storylines of several works seem similar, when the arcs settle into their formulas, they can still bring the emotion out of you. The excitement with the triumphant win, the sinking feeling in your chest with despair. It feels funny when I catch myself laughing out loud at a static panel. My jaw is literally dropped as a big reveal or unexpected event occurs. I've had to put down mangas for a bit because scenes got too intense or too graphic. I've had to take short breaks because I noticed my heart was racing alongside the action in the story. What's funnier is when these manga get adapted to anime, and I watch the panels come to life, and I feel it all over again. The wonder, the amazement, the feels. Every manga is a chance to embark on a new adventure. A short manga is a treat. Some require time to grow on you, and some feel like an insurmountable task, only to be taken on by those with an unwavering will. But regardless what story you find yourself invested in, what character you deem the best, what fighter you believe is the strongest, there's a community somewhere for you.